Hello, hello, hello. This is Gresh from the I Am CEO podcast, and I have a very special guest on the show today. I have Jason Robel of Wellevator and This Might Get Uncomfortable podcast. Jason, great to have you on the show.
Man, it's so good to see you again. Thanks for having me.
Definitely super excited to have you on. And before we jumped into the interview, I wanted to read a little bit more about Jason so you get to hear about all the awesome things that he's doing. And Jason is the co-founder of Wellevator and the co-host of the podcast, This Might Get Uncomfortable, which I've been a guest and been definitely grateful to share the mic with him. And he's the Amazon and Globe and Mail best-selling author of the Hay House Cookbook and lifestyle guide, Eternity. As the first ever plant-based chef in history with a primetime television show, his groundbreaking show, How to Live to 100, on Cooking Channel and Food Network Canada taught millions of people worldwide how to prepare delicious, organic, healthy meals at home. And described as the love child of Jim Carrey and Alton Brown, he infuses his live speaking events, videos, and digital teaching with a relentless drive to grow in a lighthearted and joyful approach to health and wellness. And as I said, I had the pleasure of being on the show. We were connected over sports injuries, interesting enough. And he's an overall awesome guy, mover and shaker, does so many things that are awesome, especially in the health and wellness space. So Jason, appreciate you taking some time out. Are you ready to speak to the IMCO community?
Let's do this. I'm
awesome.
Ready.
Let's do it then. So to kind of kick everything off, I wanted to rewind the clock a little bit, hear a little bit more on how you got started, what I call your CEO story.
Yeah, for me, it's interesting because as a little kid, I remember feeling very rebellious, and this sense of rebelliousness manifested in all kinds of crazy ways. I mean, we'd have to probably do a whole separate episode talking about the crazy stuff I did when I was a young man. But I realized that as I graduated college, I graduated with a marketing communications degree and worked in the advertising industry well before I was an entrepreneur. So I spent an entire decade in the advertising and marketing space. And I remember I had a moment of realization. I was talking to my mom back in Detroit, where I grew up. And I think I was maybe like 7-8 years into my career as a copywriter and marketing director. And I said, I don't think I'm meant to work for other people. It was this thing of like remembering that kind of childhood rebelliousness and drive to do things my way, right? I was just very, very, very bullheaded in that way. And for the last 11 years, I have been running my own business. I have 2 companies, my own, which is Robo Living LLC, which is the food side of things. And then with the more business focused social media, mental health, the podcast you mentioned, that's all in the Wellevator. So for the last 11 years, I have these 2 brands and of course, being an entrepreneur has its challenges. I mean, we could recant all the things it takes to mentally and financially survive as an entrepreneur. But you know what, Gresh, I don't think I could go back ever to working for someone else. I think that I'm, again, reflecting on childhood, just intrinsically wired to kind of just do things my way, do things in the vision that I see. So once I realized that, it was like, all right, we're doing this. And, as Tony Robbins says, we're burning the ships and we're not turning back. So that's in a nutshell, kind of my entrepreneurial journey and how I think my makeup has led to this point in my life.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that so much. And yeah, in order to take the island, you do have to burn the boats, as Tony Robbins said. So I absolutely love that. But I love too, because I think so many times, kids, and I feel like I had, some of those entrepreneurial tendencies when we were younger. And sometimes if they're not cultivated in the right way, they can turn, to more destructive things or things that aren't as helpful. But I think when you start to look at those characteristics, you start to see like some of the best innovators, great leaders have a lot of those tendencies when they're younger. And if they're cultivated, they turn into really remarkable things, some of which we're enjoying right now in these technologies.
Yeah, and I didn't realize it, right? You talk about it being cultivated because the archetypes that I had in my family growing up on both sides, mom and dad's side, were very much, again, and no judgment on this, but very much in that 9-to-5 mold. In Detroit, it's like, what do? You go work for one of the automakers, right? You work for Ford, you work for Chrysler, you work for General Motors. And there was something in me that was like, that's not my path. But it was confusing for a while because I'm like, I don't know, well, what is my path then? If it's not that, and I'm not aligning with the archetype that my family has set forth, then I'm going to be like the weirdo. And so for a while, I very much felt like kind of an outsider in my family because I was taking that different approach. So it took them a little while to like get used to the fact that, all right, Jason's doing things a little differently. But I'm glad I gave myself permission to follow my heart and do it my way.
Yeah, I appreciate you so much in sharing that, and the story that you're telling very similar to mine. I feel like I might have grew up in Detroit. You might be talking about my family in the same way, because I definitely felt, sometimes you just have to have the courage, and you don't know why you're doing it, but you have to lean into who you are, what you feel is right, and even if those that are around you may not necessarily agree with it, a lot of times they'll come around later once they see that this is not just something I'm trying out, it's something that's truly my calling and who I am.
Yeah, and I think once they realize, oh, this isn't a hobby. Like this,
Yes,
like dude is serious. He
yes.
moved all the way to California. He moved 2,500 miles away, and he's like he's committed. So to your point, I think when certain people who maybe are doubters, or they don't understand the vision, they don't understand why in your heart you have this drive to do what you do. For better or for worse, when success is kind of like the metric that people are like, oh, okay, all right, we believe you now. It's not just a hobby. So it took a few years for them to get behind it, but now my family's very, very supportive of everything I do.
Yeah, that's awesome, and I think you're absolutely right. Where I always kind of remind myself is sometimes the vision that you're given is for you. Sometimes it's not for those that are around you, and sometimes they have a different vision, and that's completely okay. That's why we all have different gifts and abilities. So I love that you leaned into that and remind us to do that as well too. And so I know you touched on the kind of two different businesses that you have. Could you take us through a little bit more about that and what you're doing to kind of serve the clients you work with?
Yeah, absolutely. So the one business I've been doing longer than the other, which is Robel Living LLC, that's very much specifically focused on um, the side of health and wellness, nutrition, the food, the cooking, and all of that. And I've been doing that for, God, at the time of this recording, I've been incorporated for 11 years now. So just past the decade mark. And that was really born out of sort of this hybridization of having the marketing background, as I mentioned, but then getting into the food space and going to culinary school. I started the company right when social media was just starting to take off. People were finally getting a hold of what YouTube could do. Instagram had just started, I think, in 2010. So back then it was like, okay, what's this Facebook thing? What's YouTube? What's Twitter? What's Instagram? So for me, it was just this vision of how do I get culinary media out there with this emerging technology of social media and do it in a way that's fun and engaging and comedic and irreverent? Because at that time, one of the inspirations to start that business was when I was watching cooking videos and I was watching nutritional content, health and wellness, it was all really boring. I mean, to the point where it was like snooze fest. I'd be watching people taking me through a yoga class or a cooking tutorial, and it was very like monotone and very boring and very technical. And I thought, I need to funk this up. I need to come in and make it fun and be the goofball that I am. And again, when I gave myself permission just to be myself, I'm going to do this comedically, I'm going to be goofy and teach people at the same time. I realized something important with that business. You talk about how I served my clients and my fans. I realized that if you get people laughing energetically, they are open to receive new information.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I go out and I do a lecture tour, or I've gone on book tour, I do my YouTube videos, my Instagram, I always try and make sure it's comedic and try and entertain people, because then they're open to receiving new ideas. And I realized that laughter is a delivery mechanism. It kind of opens that door,
Right.
and then people can walk through and receive what you have to say. So similar to Wellevator, which is the newer business, my business partner Whitney and I have been doing that 3 years now. That's focused a little more specifically on mental health, emotional wellness, addressing some of the socioeconomic issues we're facing in this country. And so what we do with that, we have several courses. We have a wellness warrior training and a consistency code, basically teaching people some tools to keep themselves mentally healthy and emotionally healthy. So leveraging a lot of digital technologies. We have a new platform we're going to be using called Hello Audio. So one of the takeaways from both businesses, man, is always experimenting with new platforms, new offerings, and new products, and seeing how people respond to it. So relentless experimentation, I think, is the thread through with both businesses.
Nice. I love that phrase, relentless experimentation, because I think, especially in a time where it's so transformational, and even as you talked about when you were starting the business 11 years ago, and happy 11 years, of course, you
Thank you.
kind of have to try out different things. You kind of have to see how things might fit together in a different way, and that's where that beauty comes from. And I think one of the most powerful things with technologies, especially social media, is you get to see behind the curtain. You get to see who a person really is. You get to showcase that comedic side as you talked about, and you get to have that connection that you didn't necessarily have before when you're just kind of reading and seeing stuff from brands.
For sure. And I think one thing with both companies, and I still keep learning this lesson for me, is of course I have heroes. You know, I have heroes in, you mentioned sports and our connection over sports.
Mm-hmm.
I got sports heroes, I got musical heroes, I got heroes in business. But I realized that for me, I think early on, especially in my 20s and 30s, I'm in my 40s now, was that I was trying too much to emulate their roadmap, right? Like imitate, not just emulate, but imitate. Like, okay, how'd they get to their first million? You know, how'd they get to the Grammy? How'd they get to the Emmy? And just studying success. But I realized that if I personally, and this goes back to the rebelliousness, if I try and imitate people too much and do exactly what they did to achieve their success, I have found that I don't come anywhere close to what they're doing, because I think it's important for us to walk our own path. It's like you take the inspiration, you take the life lessons, the stories, the autobiographies, the structures of how they've set up the things that they do. But ultimately, I think success is being ourselves and learning who we are. And especially, man, being in business for yourself will show you things about yourself you did not realize. Like, I've
Yeah.
realized that on the real tip, this is a spiritual journey. Like entrepreneurship and business, yes, it's about service. Yes, it's about serving our clients and our fans. Yes, it's about putting something in the market that's hopefully valuable and useful. But on an individual level, it has been the most hardcore spiritual journey. Like, oh my God, it continues to be.
Yeah, and that makes so much sense. And I think when you think about, I love that word journey, because I think so many times we don't look at, business and entrepreneurship along those lines, but it definitely is that it has really, really highs and really, really low lows, and everything in between and all around, that you have to test yourself. And like you said, you really start to know who you are, because during those times of frustration, tears for, so many different things under the sun, you learn who you are and what you're about.
I mean, legit. And I think, resilience
Mm-hmm.
and patience and faith, whatever that means to the listener, whatever that even means to you, Gresh, we all have our different interpretations maybe of what that is, but my God, resilience, patience, and faith, I think, are three of the biggest things that I continue to learn in this journey, because, there's some years that it's like, oh my God, I can't believe we did this well. And, for me last year, business wise, it was like, how are we going to survive?
Yeah.
So it's a roller coaster and you ride the waves. But I think, as entrepreneurs and business owners, if our heart is in the right place and we don't lose the sense of why, to me, the why now is the same why as it was when I started, which was and is, I want to increase joy and vitality in this world and help reduce suffering and pain. Mm-hmm. And I realized that on a physical, mental, spiritual level, there's a lot of tools and practices and habits people can experiment with and put into motion that will hopefully increase joy and vitality and reduce that pain and suffering. So whatever I do, whatever I offer in terms of products, services, programs, that's the mantra, increase that joy and vitality and reduce pain and suffering. So my why has not changed. And I think even on the bad days, the days where I'm sitting in the corner of my office in a ball crying, that's the thing that keeps me going, man.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. And that's why I love how you said that relentless experimentation, because I think so many times we can get tied into the tools, or I call them ingredients even, that we use, that we forget about our mission, we forget about the why. And that allows us to evolve with the times, evolve with the technologies, and so many of those different things. But if we know that this is our why and we're not as tied into the how as much as the why, then we get to really grow and expand with our business. So I absolutely appreciate that. And so would you consider that to be what I like to call your secret sauce, the thing you feel kind of sets you apart and makes you unique? It could be for your business or yourself personally, but is it that a relentless experimentation and that feeling to lean into who you are that you feel sets you apart and makes you unique?
Yeah. And I think that is definitely part of the secret sauce. And I also want to say curiosity is part of the secret sauce. And I had a great mentor that I worked with a couple of years back, a shaman, in fact. And we were talking about the mechanics and the nature of fear, and how fear guides our decision making, fear guides our belief systems. I mean, fear is a very powerful emotion. We can all agree. Fear makes us do some really interesting things. And he was saying, what if in the moments that you feel fear, you replace it with curiosity? And I thought, interesting. So part of that secret sauce of the relentless experimentation, I think, is curiosity. Well, what if we try this? We don't know how it's going to go. Well, what if we invest this money? Okay, is it a money we can afford to invest and maybe lose? Okay, let's do it. Like, I'm going through that with like crypto and investing right now. Like, okay, we have no idea what's going to go on with any of this crypto game, but I'm curious and I'm going to experiment with it. And so I think the curiosity, Gresh, is a big part of that. And what I'm trying to do when I feel afraid is, instead of be afraid of something, to get curious about it. And that's been a huge game changer for me.
Yeah, that's phenomenal. It's so funny as you were saying that. I was experimenting. I think I was going back to my Scooby Doo days where I'm watching, like, you're scared of whatever's around the corner, but
Yeah.
you don't get scared and say, "Oh, I'm not afraid." But you step into it. You say, "Hey, I have that fear," but you take one step forward, and you take another step forward, and you start to see and peek around what's there, because that's where some awesome things can happen. Even though you might feel the fear, you're not saying, "I'm going to run towards it," but you're taking step after step after step to kind of get there. So I love that, part. And I think it's something that we can all kind of lean into, because fear is real. And we do have, things that might be robbing us of opportunities if we don't step into that or lean a little bit more into it.
That's right. And I think it's a good reminder too. And obviously all of our individual experiences are completely different. But when I'm afraid and I'm trying to lean into that curiosity, I also remind myself that every time I've taken a risk and faced a big fear, whether that was skydiving, because I'm deathly afraid of heights, as an example, right? Or, leaving a really, really great salaried job 11 years ago and saying, all right, I'm going to do this entrepreneurial thing. I have no idea. I have no idea what the hell I'm doing, but I'm going to do it because my heart is telling me I need to do this. Every time I think we take that leap of faith, in my experience, it can be scary. It can be weird. We can feel like we're not knowing what we're doing, what the outcomes are. But every time I've done that, even through the trials, tribulations, setbacks, heartache, I've always ended up in a really good place. I don't have regrets for taking those leaps. So even if those leaps get scarier, even if they get more unfamiliar, I think it's important to remind ourselves that, again, whether you believe in God, spirit, universe, whatever your beliefs are, somehow, some way, everything has worked out. And I think anytime I get afraid to take a new risk, I got to remind myself, remember last time, dude, it worked out. It didn't feel like it was going to work out, but it worked out. So I think that's a good thing to remind ourselves of.
Yeah, that's a huge thing. And I think so many times when we allow stuff to kind of stay in our heads, it can sometimes build up to be or to look worse than sometimes it ends up being. So I think it's something huge that we can kind of lean into. And so I wanted to ask you now I wanted to switch gears a little bit, and I wanted to ask you now for what I call a CEO hack. So this
Okay.
could be like an app, a book, or a habit that you have, but what's something that makes you more effective and efficient?
Oh man, there's so many to choose from. For me, I want to give two real quick. And I've realized that as a rebellious person, one thing, Gresh, that I resisted in the early days of business was being organized. I thought I could just like allow my creativity to kind of guide and it did. And it still does. Like at the core, I think I'm an artist. At the core of who I am, who also happens to be a business owner. But for me, organization and time blocking is everything. So I want to give a few little tips here. The first thing that I love using is a Pomodoro timer. There's a company called Tomato One. There's a bunch of them out there, but this is a free one. It's from a brand called Tomato One. You can download it on your laptop or your smart devices. Mm-hmm. And time blocking has been a game changer, right? Because I'm the kind of dude, I will sit in this chair for 3 to 4 hours and my eyes are crusting over and I haven't drank water. And then I realize 3 hours went by and I'm less productive, right? So Pomodoro timer, you download it and you can set time blocks. So what I like to do is I will do 3 rounds of 25 minutes of work, 5 minutes of rest. And after those 3 rounds of 25 and 5, I'll take a 15-minute break. I'll go outside, I'll stretch, get my glass of water, move my body, and then come back and do 3 more rounds. So my workday is just all time blocked. And I have found that I'm much more efficient. I'm much more fresh. My energy is on point because I'm taking those breaks, which might be counterintuitive, actually helps me go longer in my workday. So that's one thing. The second thing is I'm big into task management. So I love Airtable as an online organizer, and I also love TickTick. TickTick is basically an online to-do list that allows you to do a workflow with like Whitney's my business partner. So we have a workflow there. So Pomodoro timer from Tomato One, Airtable for organizing tasks, and to-do list with TickTick. Those are three. Every single day I use those three tools.
Yeah, that's absolutely awesome. And it's so funny that you said that about, the creativity part and trying to unleash that. I try to remind myself that the systems and the processes will set you free because you can take care of those things that you don't need to worry about. And to me, it allows you to be more present and more creative. So I love those hacks, and especially the Pomodoro, you said the Tomato One app. I haven't heard of that because it is counterintuitive, but it allows you to kind of recharge so that you can focus and be even more effective in that time that you allot. So I love both of those hacks. And so I wanted to ask you now for what I call a CEO nugget. So this could be a word of wisdom or piece of advice. It might be something you would tell your younger self if you were to jump into a time machine, or you might also tell a client.
Oh man. So I have been blessed with having a mentor in my life. His name is Michael Park, also a business owner, but not just business. He's really been more of like a life mentor. And one thing he said to me years ago that has always stuck with me, like just drilled in my brain. He said, what is happening is good and to your advantage, whether or not you can see it or feel it in the moment. Mm. And there's so many, like you said, Gresh, so many moments where it's like, can I even do this? Can I keep going? Do we have the cash flow to keep running? I mean, there's a million situations we face where it's like, I don't know if this is going to keep going, if I can even do this. But that thing reminds me that I believe we live in a friendly universe. Albert Einstein once said the most important decision you can make is choosing whether you live in a friendly universe or a malevolent one. Mm-hmm. And so that piece of advice from Michael reminds me that, like, yeah, whether I can see it or feel it in this moment, it's all going to work out. Like, it's ultimately to my advantage, to my growth, to my experience as a human being here on the planet. So I think that's one big thing that has just drilled in my brain ever since he told it to me like 10 years ago.
Yeah, that's huge. And it's so funny because again, that reminds me of something that I'll constantly tell myself is that everything isn't happening to you, it's happening for you. Because I think we can very quickly get into that victim, like, why is this happening to me? Or I want, payroll why is payroll not, set up the way I want it to be, whatever it might be. But I think if we understand that, as you said so well, if we look back at some of the things that have happened in our life, as frustrating as seems like end of the world type situations are happening, it ended up turning out better than we thought it would be. So if we tap into that and we understand it's happening for you, we can kind of listen to whatever lesson it might be and kind of redirect according to that.
Yeah. And I think as a result of having that trust in life, we give ourselves the ability to take more risks, right? Because if I'm afraid and I'm believing my worldview is this is going to be awful, it's going to wreck me, it's going to ruin my reputation, it's going to destroy my whatever it is, right? Those thoughts. But it's like, you know what? I can roll the dice on this thing. And I know it might be scary, it might be weird, it might be unfamiliar, it might be stressful, but I know that I'm going to be okay on the other end of this. It's not going to destroy me. So I think it engenders a certain kind of trust in life for me. And I try to remind myself of that every day.
Yeah, and we're reminded that sometimes we're not giving anything more than we can handle, which I think is one of the biggest things. Yeah, we have to kind of tap into is that, okay, if it's coming my way, then that means I can step into it because I have everything I need to get over that hump or whatever it might be.
Yeah, confidence, right?
Yes,
cultivating that inner confidence.
Yes, absolutely. And so I wanted to ask you now my absolute favorite question, which is the definition of what it means to be a CEO. And we're hoping to have different quote unquote CEOs on this show. So Jason, what does being a CEO mean to you?
Well, I mean, it's funny because I'm technically a co-CEO right now with Whitney, which is the first time I've ever actually ran a business with anyone else. I've been a solopreneur for, again, 11 years. So the past 3 years been a co-CEO. What does being a CEO mean to me? I think it means being a shepherd for the unseen. We have visions, we have dreams, we have things that are burning in our heart that we want to birth into the world. And I think being a CEO is being a steward for the unseen dreams and the visions and the future of humanity, right? It's like it's almost like being an alchemist. You have these things on, and you have all the white papers. I have my whiteboard back there. Mm-hmm. It's like, so as a CEO, how do I take the visions, the dreams, the words, and actualize them and turn them into material reality. So to me, I think it's being a visionary, but it's having the courage and the resilience to see that vision through to fruition. Mm-hmm. And the patience to see that vision through to fruition. Because I found, man, that most things take a lot longer than I think they will initially.
Yeah, absolutely. Patience and resilience as well too. And what do they say? The secret to the overnight success is it takes 10 years. And probably costs 10 times as much as well too. But
it's real. It's real though. It's real.
But I love how that kind of speaks to kind of a responsibility, for lack of a better term. I love that shepherd word and being able to kind of figure out, what the vision might be. And I think a lot of times we do that externally by looking at what's missing in the world, especially from an entrepreneurial standpoint. How can I fulfill that gap? How can I add in comedic, thoughts to, the cooking that was dull before? Like, how can I create something that's new in an alchemist type way so that it can make the world a better place? And I think when you tap into that and lean into that in so many different ways, things go to an entirely different level.
Yeah. And it's interesting, right? Because I think that in some ways also, as a CEO, as a business owner, not being attached to the outcome. Because I find that in the past, when I have made, and this is good as a guidepost, like whether that was like, I need to make this amount of money every month, and this is my metric for whatever our monthly revenues or our annual revenues are going to be. Sometimes we'd exceed it, sometimes we fall short. And so I think initiating these visions into the world, having the systems, having the structures we've talked about, having the faith, the persistence, the patience, part of it too is we have to let go of the outcome. Because ultimately, I think the effort is in our control. The attitude is in our control. The partnerships that we cultivate are in our control. The output is, but the outcome is definitely not in our control.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's something that we always kind of have to remind ourselves of, because we have a vision sometimes and we could get so dialed in and tied to that vision that we don't allow it to manifest itself and mold and to change and adapt whatever, it might happen to that, at that current moment. And I think when we truly are leading, we're being shepherds, we're not controlling, we're actually stewarding and pushing it towards where it should be, but we're open to how it can change and manifest itself. So I love that perspective.
Yeah, I think it's a push-pull, right, for me, because yes. I tend to be a little bit of a control freak, like yes. I am, but I've realized that too much control and trying to exercise too much influence over outcomes is actually counterproductive in many ways. So it's like, all right, got to be a good steward, got to be a good shepherd, got to put the energy, got to be persistent, but also got to let go, because maybe life has a bigger plan than even I've envisioned, right?
Mm. Yeah, absolutely. You hear that so many times about people that start stuff sometimes just because they're interested in it. And next thing you know, it blossoms to something huge that changes the entire world. So yes, that's a great reminder. And I need to hear it as well myself. So thank you for sharing that with us. And Jason, truly appreciate that. Of course, I appreciate your time even more. What I wanted to do is just pass you the mic, so to speak, just to see if there's anything additional that you can let our readers and listeners know. And of course, how best they can get a hold of you, subscribe to the podcast, get a copy of the book, and find out about all the awesome things you're working on.
Yeah, for sure. So I just want to say that we have a lot of free resources. So anyone out there looking to get perspectives on consistency, habit building, mental health, resilience, at wellevator.com, WELLEVATR.com. We have a free resources section with multiple ebooks, 2 video trainings, all free, just completely complimentary, just to kind of get you in the flow of the systems and the protocols and the coaching that we do with Wellevator. And then we also have the great podcast you talked about, Gresh, that you were a wonderful guest on. This Might Get Uncomfortable. We've got almost 250 episodes right now, and that's on all the major podcast players: Spotify, Syncify, Apple Podcast, Amazon Podcasts. And then we also have 2 YouTube channels. I've got my individual YouTube channel, which is mostly focused again on nutrition, wellness, human optimization. And then we also have the video versions of all the podcasts on our Wellevator channel. So if people just want to Google Wellevator, WELLEVATR, or punch in my name, Jason Robel, it's WROBEL. There's literally hundreds and hundreds of videos, free trainings, courses, podcasts. There's a lot of goodies out there. And most of them are free, because I think, Gresh, if you really, as a business owner and a content creator, just deluge people with value and give them really good stuff, and know that they know that you deeply care about their growth and their evolution, that creates long-term relationships. And many clients of mine over the years have become friends. And you know what, man? That's like one of the greatest gifts is you work with someone professionally, but you create such a deep bond that they end up becoming friends. And I'm proud to say that many, many clients have gone down that road with me.
Nice. Well, I truly appreciate that. And you can definitely Google everything, or to make it even easier, we'll have it in the show notes too, just so that everybody can click through. But I think so many times we forget about, I always say, the human, part of life and business. And I love that piece that you talked about, is that you get the opportunity to provide value for somebody, and you get an even stronger human connection as a result of it. Because I think so many times we forget about that. So thank you so much for, taking some time out. Thank you so much for all the awesome work that you do. And I hope you have a phenomenal rest of the day.
You too, Gresh. Thanks so much.